Hello everyone, my name is Bramble. I hope you enjoy the story I'm about to tell, but first a small disclaimer. Although Welsh history and mythology were inspirations for Cambria and its kingdoms, this is an original piece of writing. That being said, get your snacks ready, because we're about to begin. The Knightbane's Prize. Storms had flooded the castle courtyard for nearly a week. Despite this, an impressive crowd was gathered around a pillory on top of a small stage. A young girl dangled from her punishment, so short she could not stand while trapped in that wooden block. An older woman handed out spoiled food, then invited others to throw it. Between this child and the downpour, none noticed when an old knight paused under a nearby archway. Sir Corbin stood a foot shorter than most men. His slender frame was wrapped in wiry muscles, well hidden by a breastplate in need of new paint. The gambeson beneath it split into a half skirt, which shielded those skinny legs from behind. Unlike other knights, who often employed young men to hold their weapons, he carried them on either hip. The first, a hand and half sword, was sheathed in a cloth-wrapped scabbard. A gloved hand rested on its flat handle, which was tightly bound by a strip of leather. His thumb thoughtfully flicked across that coin-shaped pommel while he watched them hurl rotting cabbage. Another sheath held a hollow rod of iron, backed by a wooden stock. When a young man approached this girl with a sharpened stick, Sir Corbin drew his second weapon. Louder than thunder, that skyward gunshot caused all but one to flinch. Several people screamed, a few fled, most were frozen in panic. When Sir Corbin stepped forward, this crowd parted. Before he completed a single stride, his shotgun's barrel was snapped, reloaded, and resheathed. None dared to look at the old knight, except a girl who glared at him. A rain-drenched curtain of dirt-black hair fell across eyes which burned with twilight. When he pushed it aside, this brat dragged her lips back to snarl at him. Sir Corbin nodded in approval, then draped a warm cloak over those rags used for clothing. She growled briefly as his sword was drawn, only to fall silent once its pommel smashed open the pillory. That girl collapsed with a dull thud, exhausted. Sir Corbin knelt to check her pulse and received a handful of sharp teeth as a reward. He choked back a gasp of pain, then asked so quietly nobody else heard him, "You got a name, lass?" There was a long pause. "They call me Bear Girl." She bit down harder, then swiped at his face. When Sir Corbin barely budged, her jaw relaxed slightly, and he pulled that hand back. Bear Girl tentatively sniffed at him, those bright eyes narrowed in suspicion. The old knight nodded as though it were an expected answer, then stood to leave. "Well, goodbye, Bear Girl." Though she followed close behind, her footfalls were well hidden for a child no older than 10. Despite a leisurely pace, Sir Corbin soon arrived at this castle, where a knight in grass-blue armour halted him. When asked to display proof heraldic, he loudly lamented that his cloak was gone. On cue, a tiny hand tugged him by an elbow as Bear Girl reappeared. Meanwhile, the local knight stood dumbfounded by their conversation. "Ah, it's you." Sir Corbin knelt to be at eye level with her and smiled when she refused to let go of his arm. "Thank you for bringing my cloak. I suppose this means we're even." "Take me with you. I can help more." Those bright eyes glared at him insistently. When he responded with a chuckle, this girl's pale lips were dragged back in another snarl. It quickly faltered into a slight scowl before she bit the lemon. "Please." "You truly want to come with me?" Sir Corbin leaned forward an inch. When her head dipped with a nod, a delighted simper slowly curled up his own lips. He gently ruffled that dirt-black hair and replied, "Good, then follow me." The knight who had blocked their path glanced down at this cloak wrapped around her, then led them inside. They entered through an enormous chamber of white stone, taller than 4 men. Those walls contrasted sharply with a floor of darkened marble, which Bear Girl left rain-spattered when she shook herself dry. This hall was lit by iron braziers on either side of oak-hewn doors, left open to reveal the court of Gwynedd. A crowd of advisors dressed in expensive robes watched their introduction with narrowed gazes. Sir Corbin ignored them and approached Queen Yvonne, who rose from her throne in shock. She wore a long gown of ochre flame, trimmed by blood-red accents. Sea-black hair had been woven into an elaborate braid, decorated with golden ornaments which shone ethereally. He quickly knelt, and a gloved hand guided Bear Girl to copy him. Murmurs rippled through the crowd when Queen Yvonne stepped toward them. Sir Sean, a tall man in flaxen half-plate, gestured at several knights who quickly escorted each courtier from this hall. That girl's bright eyes darted back and forth before her lips were drawn back in another snarl. The Queen replied with a tender smile, "You don't need to be afraid." "Not," Bear Girl frowned briefly, then glanced at Sir Corbin. He cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I found her in a pillory moments ago, so please forgive her lack of manners." A pillory? Any warmth was swept away when a wave of cold anger crashed across Queen Yvonne's sublime features. Once stood beside Sir Sean, it became clear to all that they were the same height. Calloused fingers hooked over brightly painted armour before he was dragged to his knees. She loomed above him, greater than any wave swept up by the storm outside. Its thunder rumbled behind her words. "Who permitted that?" "No knight presided over it, Your Majesty," Sir Corbin cried as lightning flashed behind stained glass. Queen Yvonne immediately released that knight, then bid everyone to stand. She apologised, eyes lowered in shame. He sighed in relief and caught a nod of gratitude from Sir Sean when they rose. Outside, the thunder faded until it was swallowed by muffled rainfall. Queen Yvonne dismissed one of her attendants to fetch towels for them both, then perched on that high-backed throne. While they waited, Sir Corbin pivoted from the topic of Bear Girl's mistreatment. He did so through a recently won trophy. It was taken after a victory against an Avanc, which had become a Knightbane when 3 of Gwyneff's warriors perished. A leather satchel on his belt contained an oddly shaped bundle. Layers of cotton were tightly wrapped around an enormous severed hand, cut from a horrid amalgam of crocodilian and rodent features. Dark fur grew between its pebble-hued scoots, perfect camouflage for an amphibious predator. Each of the Avanc's 5 fingers ended in thick claws, which clung tightly to any prey before they were wrestled into deeper waters by this monster. When Sir Corbin held that trophy aloft, several knights in grass-blue armour gasped quietly. A rhythmless drumbeat of rain on stained glass filled the awestruck silence. Queen Yvonne leant forward, her verdant eyes wide in disbelief. None moved, entranced by this proof of victory. It was Sir Sean who eventually broke that enchantment, with a belly-deep laugh which shook his brothers-in-arms from their daze. Large hands crashed together in reverent applause as he loudly proclaimed, "Amazing! I'd expect no less from the Order of Branwen." It did not take long before those knights followed their leader's example and cheered for Sir Corbin. Even the Queen gently tapped her palm in a quieter display of admiration, which several servants soon imitated. Meanwhile, Bear Girl rapidly glanced about this room, startled by every clap or roar from his fellow warriors. He gently brushed a gloved hand across that dirt-black hair. In response, she lifted those bright eyes towards him, then reached up and held on to a sleeve of black gambeson. Even the rain briefly halted when Queen Yvonne signalled for this hall to be silent. Sir Corbin slowly approached to lay his trophy before her throne, followed by Bear Girl. They stepped back together and knelt, a fist clenched above their hearts. An affectionate smirk gently tugged at the Queen's lips when she saw this child imitate him, one he mirrored. "Your Majesty?" Sir Corbin addressed her after a narrow breath, head bowed in deference. Despite that warm welcome, his heart pounded wildly against the shadow-clad breastplate. They were unreasonably fond of Bear Girl, who appeared unfamiliar with them. It felt suspicious enough to warrant restraint. Eventually, this Black Knight mastered himself and proclaimed in a voice deeper than the sea, "In accordance with the high laws of Cambria, I claim the Knightbane's prize." "You would take her as a page?" Queen Yvonne's brow wrinkled slightly. She slowly rose from that throne, her verdant gaze cast toward Bear Girl, whose bright eyes silently pleaded in return. Sir Sean stepped forward then, his face flushed with indignation before he loudly insisted, "Such a request is unthinkable." "It is no request." The entire hall froze. "It is my right." "We are required to give you a page." Rust-brown eyes darted to Bear Girl, then widened as Queen Yvonne knelt in front of this child. Sir Sean's eye doubled before he looked back up, and scarred lips retreated in a growl. "But we do not give her." Enough. Thunder rumbled behind that word which forced the Golden Knight to kneel. None dared breathe, their silence mocked by a barrage of needle-thin raindrops against stained windows. Though even this relented as the Queen bowed her head and whispered to all present, "My earlier outburst was shameful enough. Do not harm our reputation further." "Your Majesty?" Before she spoke further, Bear Girl stared up at Sir Corbin until he offered a nod of encouragement. That bright gaze turned back to Queen Yvonne, who listened with a melancholic smile to a voice faint enough it almost vanished behind the rainfall. "I want to go with him." "Then you shall." Gentle hands reached forward to cup this child's face in a motherly fashion. Queen Yvonne's tone was indulgent, yet betrayed a hint of sorrow which caused Sir Sean to wince. Bear Girl did not snarl or bite as she had with Sir Corbin. Instead, dusklit eyes glanced about this hall in confusion until they settled on him. Before he could respond, Queen Yvonne commanded a pair of knights to open those oaken doors. Once the crowd of courtiers had returned, she raised a gold-adorned hand and proclaimed, "By our high laws, Sir Corbin and his page shall be my guest until this storm passes. Tomorrow, we feast in recognition of his victory over a Knightbane." Sir Sean quickly instigated another round of applause for that Black Knight, which many advisers imitated as they glanced between one another. In this commotion, he placed a tender hand on Queen Yvonne's shoulder. She replied with a gentle squeeze of his arm to reassure him before any but Sir Corbin noticed it. Those cold eyes, the hue of a river-smoothed pebble, darted away when her attention was drawn toward Bear Girl once more. That attendant from earlier finally returned, towels piled up high. Queen Yvonne immediately dismissed them again, this time as a guide around the castle. Additionally, 2 footmen were sent to retrieve Sir Corbin's possessions from a nearby inn. While they walked, Bear Girl's nose briefly wrinkled in disgust. Eventually, beneath a lavender scent which buried this young servant, he also detected pipe smoke and chuckled softly. End of part 1. Their room, though small, was well furnished. A decently sized bed had been pressed against a wall of volcanic stone, each block harvested and hewn in a nearby quarry. They also found a quaint hearth, which waited to be lit, with a bucket of birch twigs placed beside it. Finally, beneath a window of cloudy glass, a slim table was pinched between 2 cushioned chairs. At Sir Corbin's request, that servant brought Bear Girl an unspoiled gown and fresh undergarments. It took him a moment to convince her of them, though she eventually agreed when he promised the cloak would be returned. After his own possessions had been delivered by those footmen, Sir Corbin also changed into a more comfortable attire. Well suited for rest, it consisted of a cotton shirt and slate blue trousers. Both were far baggier than either gambeson or chausse. That servant, whose name was Dylan, returned soon after with the requested ingredients. When a silver caneog pressed against his palm, this attendant gave a low whistle in appreciation, then bowed. Once they were alone, Sir Corbin showed Bear Girl how to mix their milk, water, oats and honey into a simple porridge. While it bubbled away, he took a cup of water warmed by the fire to help him comb through her hair. Wooden teeth snagged on those brambles a dozen times. When they did, she growled fiercely, then thrashed against his grasp. After Bear Girl had been detangled, Sir Corbin knelt by that hearth to fill 2 bowls for them. Its heat washed over each bruise taken from the Avank and soothed them. Pale flames restored this night's vigour as greyed hair was lit by colourful embers, only to be lost once he sat down by their window. Sir Corbin briefly grimaced when Bear Girl lifted that bowl and ate from it like a wild beast. Occasionally, she scooped up some with either hand, then winced as the steam blistered each of those tiny fingers. Porridge spattered across his cloak, certain to stain. In response, he sighed softly before a spoon was held up in front of her. "Next time, I'd like you to use this." "Not this time." Bear Girl looked past this utensil at him. His head shook back and forth gently. "You're too hungry to learn etiquette right now. Just eat your fill, lass." They ate together in silence after that, their meal accompanied by the pleasant crackle of a warm hearth, although, when he noticed Bear Girl's hair had been dipped in porridge, Sir Corbin almost burst into laughter. Once she put down that bowl, this old knight dampened a cloth to clean her with. His chest rumbled softly as slender fingers drew back the child's tangled hair in a low ponytail held by pale twine. When he gave Bear Girl a second serving, those tiny hands immediately grabbed a spoon which she ignored earlier. Even though it was gripped like a hammer, this attempt made him smile all the same. After that bowl had been emptied, her whole body relaxed as food warmed it from within. Those bright eyes slowly shut, and she dipped forward in exhaustion, so Sir Corbin carried Bear Girl to a cot near their fireplace. This child was small enough he could fold a blanket twice with plenty left over to tuck beneath her. Before the knight could back away, a hand gripped his far tighter than should be possible for one so much tinier. Sir Corbin glanced around her shoulder at that girl, whose eyes remained closed while she mumbled into the pillow beneath her. "Don't go." "I'll stay for a bit, until you doze off," he promised, then ran gentle fingers over Bear Girl's dirt black hair. A pit formed in his stomach and swallowed a question this older man truly wanted to avoid. Eventually, Sir Corbin mastered himself once more to drag the words back up. "You know, if you come with me, you'll have to learn how to be a knight, right, lass?" "Do you not want me to go with you?" Bear Girl mumbled after a long pause, her bright eyes opened wide. Then she rolled over to face that fire and watch its embers crackle. A voice choked by tears whispered, "I wish they had never found me." "It's not that. I hope you do come." Sir Corbin's arms crossed over his knees as he leant forward. A low sigh escaped him before the knight admitted, "It'll be dangerous and difficult, so I want to be sure this is truly what you want." She rolled over once more, wrapped in both that blanket and Sir Corbin's cloak, which was pulled over her head. Only those dusk-lit eyes peeked out from beneath it. After a moment, he pulled each back just enough to stroke this child's hair. Bear Girl grumbled softly in protest, yet no teeth sank into his hand as they had before. Instead, she rolled to be face down on that pillow and continued to mumble. "What does a knight do?" "Well, we hunt monsters or fight bandits." He stroked a frost-tipped goatee pensively. After a brief ponder, Sir Corbin recalled the words of his own master with a warm smile. When Bear Girl turned slightly to look up at him, this old knight chuckled softly and answered her. "We protect people." "Protect people," she repeated as those bright eyes widened. Sir Corbin watched that child roll over, while small hands scrunched up his cloak in tiny fists. Pale cheeks grew flushed, stained by the firelight. Eventually, Bear Girl's gaze drifted toward him before she whispered, "Does it feel good?" if I'm doing it right. A hand rested on top of hers and dwarfed it entirely, until a sudden knock caused Sir Corbin to sit up straight. He quickly answered their door, surprised by the squire in dark green gambeson who awaited him. When Bear Girl rose from that cot, this old man shook his head. "You rest, lass." "Sir Corbin, Her Majesty wishes to see you." To avoid disrespect, a coal-black robe was thrown over those casual garments and belted around the waist. Once appropriately dressed, he hurried to find a pair of slippers, then swiftly heeded Queen Yvonne's summons. They passed by several knights, who patrolled these corridors in verdant armour. Each bowed respectfully as Sir Corbin hurried by. Eventually, their journey halted outside a plain door which had been left unguarded. This squire rapped his knuckles against it, then waited until a muffled voice called for them to enter. The Queen's private parlour easily dwarfed that guest room. Tall bookcases lined these walls of dark stone, occasionally interrupted by a portrait or tapestry. A dozen comfortable chairs filled this space, all pointed toward a huge fireplace which blazed with light. Sir Sean rested before that hearth, a mug of ale in one hand. He had changed into a grass-blue robe, its leafy hues far brighter than those his squire wore. Meanwhile, Queen Yvonne stood behind a large table and silently packed a leather satchel. She was dressed in a pale gown, embroidered by vines which climbed its mist-thin fabric in a trim of dark green. Her lips briefly curled into a kindly smile. "Garrett, please guard my door for us." Once more, any warmth visible was washed away the moment that door closed. Sir Corbin swallowed nervously, deafened by his own pulse. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain rattled against Queen Yvonne's window. Brief flashes of lightning shone through this clouded glass. In contrast, the room remained entirely silent, except for an occasional crackle of flame. Sir Sean watched from a comfortable chair, half hidden behind an empty mug, before he decided to turn away timidly. "Tell me, what changed?" Queen Yvonne glowered from behind that table, which her fingertips drummed in an impatient rhythm. Sir Corbin felt as though his tongue was nailed down, unable to speak. When he failed to answer, she approached at a stern pace and elaborated for him. "When you came to Gwynedd, you didn't want a page, so why do you want to take her now?" "She wasn't afraid." The answer came with unexpected ease, though the Queen seemed unsatisfied. "They couldn't break her. She'll make a great knight." Those verdant eyes narrowed slightly as a calloused hand rested on Sir Corbin's chest. She sighed softly, disappointed by that response. "But it's not a reason for you to take her, when you were so opposed before." "All right." He backed up a step and admitted in a choked voice to himself more than anyone. "I just knew if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to bear it. Feels fated, daft as it sounds." "That is a very good reason." Queen Yvonne seemed to shrink from regret. She almost leaned on this black knight, then turned toward the table of neatly rolled clothes. Sir Corbin's pebbled gaze skimmed across a variety of dresses which lay there. Each was sturdy enough to travel in, and a perfect size for Bear Girl. Eventually, that storm outside grew distant, as a voice softer than spring rains struggled against tears. "I delayed far too long, so this is the only motherly act I can do for her before she's gone." "Your Majesty, you must understand." He bowed forward in a display of deference. His eyes glanced towards Sir Sean, who quietly procured a mug of ale. After a narrow breath, this older knight attempted to explain. "When I freed the girl, she could not give a name other than Bear Girl, so I assumed." "What have I left that girl to?" A broad hand hid those grass-blue eyes, a mask of rounded knuckles which tears leaked from in small droplets. "I gave her a name, years ago when she was first brought to this court. She's called Atta." "Here, your majesty, let me explain." Sir Sean handed her a mug of ale, which she drank from deeply. "I found Atta in a bear den on my proving. It was a few days south of Reged." "I wanted to adopt her immediately," the Queen interjected once that cup was emptied, "but my father forbade it." "With respect, your majesty," Sir Corbin grimaced slightly when offered some ale and shook his head. "Your father died 6 years ago. Why didn't you adopt her then?" "There were many distractions at that time." She sighed, then gratefully accepted another drink, though this one was stared into pensively. After a small sip of it, her gaze rose in a brief glance at both knights. "My rule is precarious, Sir Corbin. I could never bear a child, and it's no longer possible to sire one." "The vultures insist a vassal be her heir," Sir Sean growled as a rosy hue overcame his cheeks. He had drunk heavily from that rejected mug, in addition to one poured for himself. Queen Yvonne giggled at this candour. "Sean, would you put another log on the fire for me? I get so cold these days." "Your Majesty." Sir Corbin smirked faintly and nodded toward the leather satchel she had packed. "Any who join our order give up their titles. We are known as peasant knights for a reason." "I see." Her eyes brightened with a mischievous smile. He departed soon after, led once more by Garrett through Castle Glyndŵr to their guest room. Bear Girl, or Atta, lay so still that Sir Corbin doubted she actually slept, though her face was turned toward the hearth, which made it difficult to be certain. His fingers ran across freshly tangled hair for a few minutes until shallow breaths eventually deepened. The knight chuckled in response, then collapsed into bed with a grunt of pain. Long bruises covered him where that Avank's tail battered armour while its maul was avoided. Over an hour passed before Sir Corbin's mind surrendered to rest. Once it had, he lay upon a familiar beach of fist-sized stones. When able to sink deeper, there were no dreams, even as a tide of delirium washed over his senses. Hours passed, stranded until a firm knock at their door roused him. His eyes opened slowly to the pain of dawn. End of Part 2. Sir Corbin winced as that practice sword thwacked into black gambeson. Even though it was wrapped in cloth to cushion these blows, a heavy stick still stung if struck against a limb. They moved back to their marks when the referee signalled a point for Sir Sean. 1-1 in a best of 3. This old man's slow breaths contrasted sharply with those gasps from his opponent. A flag was dropped between them before a crowd of sweat-drenched squires cheered as their final round began. Each knight danced between various stances and stepped to an inaudible rhythm both instinctively felt. A nimble thrust caught Sir Corbin between guards, struck off balance. Though he battered it aside, there was no time to riposte before his opponent's practice sword snapped toward him once more. This black knight retreated so the second attack barely missed, then thrusted in retaliation. Sir Sean did not fall into that trap as hoped, and pivoted around it to strike from a roof guard. Their match ended with a round of thunderous applause from all present, except for Atta, who frowned slightly while she observed the fight at a distance. "What did you learn, lass?" Sir Corbin approached after both knights shook hands. His face wrinkled in a grimace as bruises ached across those lean muscles, fatigued by this exercise. He sat down beside her and affectionately ruffled that dirt-black hair, which received a grumble in response. "Just say what you saw, and I'll fill in the blanks for you. Don't worry." "Well, you both changed stances a lot." She straightened up when a familiar face began a second duel with Sir Sean. Queen Yvonne had donned a crimson and gold gambeson, the colours of Gwynev's royalty. Atta crouched in that seat, then leant forward to watch this fight closely. "He got 2 hits on you, but—" "Finish that thought, lass." Sir Corbin turned to observe their match for himself with a small smirk. He performed a double take when the Queen held up an enormous stick wrapped in undyed cotton. That practised greatsword rolled around her so fast it blurred, a pale wave which broke into foam as Sir Sean parried a fearsome strike and was knocked back 2 yards. Atta's dusklit eyes widened in amazement, unable to conceive of the strength behind such a feat. She muttered, fixated entirely on this fight. "Each of your attacks would have killed him, but his were aimed to bounce off your armour." "Then why did I lose?" Sir Corbin leant back so Atta was kept in view. When that younger knight stepped into an ox guard, he gave a nod of approval. Then Sir Sean darted around the Queen, who was forced to turn back and forth between broad cuts. His page leant back to imitate him. "You attacked less." "So why is the Queen going to lose?" Sir Corbin asked only a moment before the practised sword struck her shoulder. Atta briefly pondered in silence. "She attacks more." "Swordsmanship has 4 fundamentals." He scratched at his beard as their second round began. Queen Yvonne showed no signs of fatigue, unlike Sir Sean, who barely contained each breath to a thin whistle. This older knight turned back toward the young girl and tapped her forehead. "There's your ken, speed, aggression, toughness. So why does Sir Sean keep winning?" "This game doesn't last very long," she replied with such confidence in that answer, Sir Corbin almost laughed. Instead, he ruffled the child's hair once more, which was met by another grumble. Bright eyes tracked each footstep before this contest ended to dozens of loud cheers. "You two fight. He plays." "True, but be careful of what you say," Sir Corbin advised as they were approached. "He's their Grand Master for a reason." "Atta, I hope you're learning a lot." Queen Yvonne's smile was warmer than the sun. When both of them bowed, it faltered slightly, clearly uncomfortable with such reverence in this context. He realised then she wore no hair ornaments besides a crimson and gold cloth to hold that braid in place. After a short hesitation, the Queen continued, "I wanted to propose something to you, dear girl. For a long time Your Majesty!" A young knight in grass blue armour entered this courtyard so fast their cape fluttered behind them. It was decorated by a golden dragon on an alabaster shield, the Order of Owain's heraldry. They knelt in deference, and continued to speak after a nod from Sir Sean. "Grandmaster, I was told to inform you those responsible for the pillory have been gathered." "Sir Rowan, never mind." The Queen sighed and bid all present to follow. Castle Glendore's great hall was only a short jaunt away. Inside its antechamber, a robed servant waited with golden jewellery. Until that point, Atta had followed close behind Sir Corbin. Before they entered, Queen Yvonne silently beckoned this child to stand alongside her instead. Bright eyes stared at the old knight, until he gave a nod of encouragement. Dozens of people knelt in front of that throne, though only 2 were immediately recognised by Sir Corbin. Further back, he noticed a young lad who had approached Atta with a sharpened stick. Ahead of the others, a grey-haired woman bowed timidly when she stood before them as an instigator only yesterday. It was a struggle for him not to throttle her, as though his own child paled under that glower. He remained furious until Atta's lips parted in a growl, at which Sir Corbin grinned with pride. "You are accused of pillorying this girl." Queen Yvonne took a moment to memorise each of their faces, then glanced at the old knight and studied his ire. After a considerate pause, She sat upon that tall throne of black marble before Atta was lifted onto her knee. Though there was no longer any thunder to boom behind this voice, none reacted differently. I will allow each of you to defend yourselves, then deliver sentences to the guilty. A portly woman spoke first. Your Majesty, I'm here for my boy John. He's younger than that child, so please, have mercy. The Queen's glare softened at that request. When Atta rested a tiny hand upon her arm and nodded stiffly, she responded with an indulgent smile. Those who represented their children were asked to return at a later date instead. Once these parents had departed, each adult stood to advocate for themselves one by one. However, the only excuse any offered was that another misled them. All pointed to this older woman and cried in turn. Your Majesty, she assured me the girl was a thief. It was Mim, Your Majesty. She's always hated that bear girl. She told me someone had been robbed by the child. Only half a dozen of the 40 gathered refused to scapegoat another for their actions and apologised contritely, though none of these exceptions referred to Atta by name, except for that young man Sir Corbin recognised. Meanwhile, Mim gathered up her wine-red gown in slender fists. When she was allowed to offer a defence, none was given except, I have nothing to defend, Your Majesty. That beast you hold had blackened my grandchild's eye, and she needed to be punished. Your Majesty, most were misled. A courtier in a pale blue dress spoke out. A waist-length braid of red hair swayed gently as she gestured at the crowd behind Mim. For those who did not intend to defy your laws, some leniency would be advised. All made a choice, all will be judged. Queen Yvonne spoke in distant thunder, which echoed off alabaster and marble. Outside, winds responded loudly to this declaration, as though a new storm approached. Several groups of courtiers gathered to whisper, so quietly even Sir Corbin heard none of it. Those next words battered all with the sky's fury. The only repentance I find worthy of your crimes is that you suffer as she has. Your Majesty, you must act in... This advisor's voice halted when Queen Yvonne's lips curled back in a snarl. Forgive me. As punishment, they shall be locked. A calloused hand had risen higher with each word until its sleeve was grasped by tiny fists. Atta kept her head low and shook it emphatically, unable to hold back tears. When they embraced, Sir Corbin glanced away as his wintry demeanour thawed. The Queen sighed indulgently, then lifted this girl's chin so their eyes met. I understand. They won't be trapped like that, though they must be punished. Atta nodded in response and let go of that gambeson. You ignore her name. Treat her as a beast. A pale hand rose until it was bathed in a myriad of colours from those stained windows. Queen Yvonne's voice rang out softer than ever before, yet each word caused Atta's assailants to tremble. No less powerful, despite how quietly she spoke. I gave Atta her name. Now, I take yours, and none will speak them. None will know, aid, nor abide you until I return them. For I have made you beasts. The Order of Owain sprung into action and dragged those who had become beasts from this hall. Several knights pursued them to ensure their punishment was enforced. When Queen Yvonne's hand fell, Atta leant against her shoulder affectionately. One group of men, dressed in extravagantly patterned clothes, muttered amongst themselves with apprehensive glances toward that young girl. They fell silent as Sir Corbin cleared his throat. The old knight grinned wryly. Atta, Her Majesty wanted to ask you something earlier. Would you like to hear it? Atta turned toward Queen Yvonne, whose cheeks were rosy with embarrassment. When an advisor attempted to speak out in opposition, Sir Sean stepped in front of the throne and rested a practice sword across his shoulders. This aide gasped in indignation, then smoothed down that expensive robe before he backed off. After a brief hesitation, Queen Yvonne managed to find her voice, though it shook timidly. If you want, I could be your mother. She ran stern fingers through this child's hair just as Sir Corbin had last night. Those verdant eyes glistened with dewy tears when Atta silently hugged the Queen, who quickly returned that embrace and whispered so only a few heard, "You're such a good girl, Atta." Reactions from members of this court were mixed. Many shook their heads or glanced at one another apprehensively. Though Sir Corbin noted the advisor who had encouraged leniency earlier quickly applauded. She was joined by a dozen more courtiers, in addition to a few who responded with more cautious celebrations of Princess Atta's adoption. Meanwhile, as the girl clung to Queen Yvonne, her bright eyes stared at that old knight uneasily until he ruffled dirt-black hair again. After those advisors were dismissed, Sir Corbin was invited to accompany Atta while they waited for their feast. His initial instinct had been to refuse until a tiny hand snatched at a sleeve of gambeson with impressive strength. The princess glared up at him. Her dusk-lit eyes silently insisted that he be present. It was Sir Corbin's turn to sigh indulgently, before his head dipped in a curt nod. She needed both of them. Until the feast had been prepared, these three gathered in Queen Yvonne's private parlour. Together they played games, as though a family. When a servant brought word that their banquet awaited, Sir Corbin was gifted an onyx black robe far more extravagant than any he owned. It seemed plain in comparison to the Queen's crimson gown, however, though both were trimmed by gold, which matched Atta's twilight-hued dress. Bittersweetly, all three celebrated her welcome and departure that night. The end. Bramble here. Everyone who watched this video, thank you. If you enjoyed it, I'm happy to say there's more on the way. I'm currently editing a second story, writing a third one, and have plans for a couple more. To those who have liked or shared this, and any who supported me in making it, thank you all so much. Have a lovely day. Diolch am wrando.